Good morning, honorable lecturers, keynote speaker, and distinguished presenter and participants. Welcome to the 10th Graduate Student Conference 2021. I am Kartika, your Master of Ceremony. We are currently in the middle of the pandemic, so I hope that every one of us in your respective places is healthy and well. Pandemic indeed brings changes to almost every aspect of our life. And no matter how significant the negative impacts that we experience or listen or watch in the media, the fact that we are still able to conduct and participate in this conference would become something we could really be grateful of. Even better, we have presenters from the Philippines who are with us today in our conference. We would like to warmly welcome you here. Greetings from Indonesia. We are gathered today to have our 10th Graduate Students Conference. Graduate Students Conference is an annual event held by English Language Studies of Universitas Sanata Dharma. It has been held since 2011. Each year, Graduate Students Conference present different theme which is related to the fields of English education, literature, and linguistics. Graduate Students Conference encourage everyone who is interested in English language studies to present and participate in the conference. This year, the conference raises the issues regarding reading and teaching language and literature amidst the pandemic. This topic is chosen due to the condition that we face together amidst the pandemic of coronavirus. We are grateful that the situation is getting better now. However, our experiences in the field of English education, literature, and linguistics during the pandemic are worth to share in this occasion. The topic of the pandemic imagination, reading and teaching language and literature in time of crisis, was appointed as a forum for presenter to convey various ideas related to the ongoing pandemic, especially in the fields of education, language, and literature. Through the topics raised and through the papers submitted by the participants, we can get new views about teaching language and literature in the midst of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the midst of limited activities that are still happening today. This conference will be divided into 4 main sessions. There are the opening ceremony, the plenary session, the parallel session, and the closing. I am very content to show you our schedule today. The opening ceremony will be held from 10:30 to 10:50 a.m. And after that, we will continue to have our plenary session and discussion starting from 10:50 to 12. Later, we will move into parallel session, and during the circulation, you will be given some time to move from the main room to the parallel rooms. The parallel session in every room will be conducted from 12:10 to 13:30. During the conference, there are several rules you are required to follow. First, during the presentation, participants are asked to turn on the camera and turn off the microphone while the presenter is presenting the paper. Second, participants are asked not to eat and drink during the conference. And one more notification, at the end of the plenary session, the committee would like to take the pictures of all the presenters and participants for documentation purpose. For those who are not willing to join the photo session, you are allowed to turn off your camera later on. And now, we would like to welcome Yohanes Mahatmo Suryo Widyasmoro as the chairperson of Graduate Students Conference 2021 to deliver his speech. Mr. Yohanes, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mbak Kartika. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the 10th Graduate Students Conference this year. I'm very honored and grateful to have you all. Unfortunately, we cannot meet you in person due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, even though we only meet virtually, I hope our hearts are connected and we have a meaningful meeting today. As we all have experienced, this pandemic has been forcing us to adapt swiftly in order to make us safe from this disease while still doing our activities. This time of crisis teaches us how to manage our time better, to do everything more effectively from home. This also happens in teaching learning activities. We have to do everything at home. Teaching, learning, and working in groups. We must do all of them through online platforms like what we are doing today. What we had done in hundreds of years suddenly must be changed in a snap. There are many things to do in order to adapt to the new ways of teaching and learning activities. They are not easy tasks to do. This rapid switch is our concern as language scholars. We have to look at how language and literature should be taught and read during this dark time. Thus, GSC this year would like to raise this topic as the main theme. We are delighted and honored to have Dr. Willy Renandya from the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, to spend his time today with us to share his knowledge with us. We are also delighted to have all the 21 presenters, 37 participants, and guests from many institutions in Indonesia and even from outside Indonesia, one of them from the Philippines. I hope that today's meeting will give us broader insights to cope with this rapid change in language teaching and learning. Lastly, I would like to dedicate this event to my mother, who passed away 4 months ago due to COVID-19, and my father who is still recovering from COVID and GERD. On behalf of the committee, I would also like to dedicate this event to all parents, educators, scholars, writers, and students who have struggled so much to look for ways to teach, learn, facilitate, and entertain people during this crisis. Thank you for turning on and keeping this little light of hope during this dark period. I hope we can get through this time healthy and happy. God bless us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yohanes. And next, we would like to welcome Bapak Paulus Sarwoto, SSMA PhD, as the chairperson of Graduate Program in English Language Studies to deliver his speech. Bapak Sarwoto, the floor is yours.
Time. And participants, and graduate students of English language. Me before you, both attending the event at Kadarman Room, Central Building Universitas Dharma, as well as presenters and participants who join us at the moment via Zoom. The graduate student conference that we are having now is the 10th, and it is an annual program. Yeah, so we do every year. It has provided a forum for graduate students, not only from Universitas Dharma, but also from neighboring universities, and even from foreign universities, such as from the Philippines that we have today. By attending the conference, we hope that the participants and the presenters, the graduate students especially, can learn how to build networking among young scholars from different streams, from different institutions, from different countries. With the online conference like the one that we're doing now, the students learn to develop this online platform in combination with in-person attendance in order to reach wider presenters and audience. In the future, this seems to be the most viable method for our graduate student conference. And this year's conference theme relates the pandemic with the practice of reading and teaching in order to understand better the impact of this lengthy pandemic on our professional life as students and as teachers, as lecturers as well. Some say that the pandemic has changed the way everything is done nowadays, including our way of studying and teaching. The possibility that the pandemic will never disappear, right, but change into an endemic, right? We certainly need to anticipate our future models of classroom and research activities. We cannot expect things will return to the condition before the pandemic. This wishful thinking, I think, is misleading. I hope that we learn a lot from the conference, from our plenary speaker, Professor Willy Renandya and as you have probably realized, he has published numerous articles and books on teaching, learning, and technology, and has been an international speaker himself around the globe. I met him personally a couple of times in Jogja and also in Bandung conference. So thank you, Pak Willy, for sharing with us in English Language Studies, Sanata Dharma University. And for students, let us learn from him as well as from each other for your future career and professional networking. Happy conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Sarwoto. Last but not least, we would like to welcome Bapak Dr. F.X. Mukarto, PhD, as the Graduate Program Director, Universitas Sanata Dharma, to deliver his speech. Bapak Mukarto, the floor is yours.
Dear presenters and also participants, very good morning. Welcome to the 10th Graduate Student Conference. Welcome to the graduate program, Sanata Dharma University. I am very happy and grateful that we all are in good health so that we can attend this conference. All praise to God. The graduate program in English Language Studies distinguishes itself from other graduate programs as it embraces interdisciplinarity. It has three concentrations: linguistics, literature, and education. The interdisciplinary aspect of the program will become even more evident when the new curriculum is implemented starting the coming academic year. Right now, we are in the process of the curriculum revitalization. The Graduate Student Conference aims to provide an opportunity to graduate students to share their passion in the fields of study and communicate the results of their research. Most, if not all, of the presentations are about the studies conducted by the graduate students, both from this university and other universities in Indonesia and also overseas. This is something which is very encouraging. The conference is also an opportunity to learn from one another. And we are very fortunate and grateful as we will learn much from our beloved key speaker, Dr. Willy Renandya, one of the big names in extensive reading and listening. For your information, he is also the father of Indonesian Extensive Reading Association, or IRA, the home base of which is the English Education Study Program, Sanata Dharma University. IRA is the door to access and to use abundant resources from the Extensive Reading Foundation. I do hope that we can learn much from him today. To our distinguished keynote speaker, presenters, and participants, enjoy the conference. Wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Mukarto. And now, it is the time for our plenary session. Here with us today is Dr. Willy Ardian Renandya. Dr. Willy is a principal lecturer at the ELL department in National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He holds an MA in TESL and a PhD in Educational Psychology from University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1990. His teaching and research interests include second and foreign language pedagogy, extensive reading, language testing, and curriculum development. Dr. Willy has published research articles in various journals, authored an ESL textbook, and edited numerous books. His latest publication include Motivation in the Language Classroom in 2014, Simple, Powerful Strategies for Student-Centered Learning with George Jacobs and Michael Power. For the past 20 years, Dr. Willy's work has revolved around working with pre-service as well as in-service English teaching professional in the Asian region, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Today, Dr. Willy would like to share his knowledge under the field of extensive reading, entitled, Why Extensive Reading and Listening is Good for You. During his presentation, we would like to encourage all of the participants to be actively engaged in asking questions or prompting any topics for discussion in the chat box. So, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Willy Ardian Renandya. Dr. Willy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It always gives me a great pleasure to be among friends and with a lot of students as well. I remember many years ago, I also was a student studying at the English department at this very university. But back then it was a teacher's institute of IKIP Sanata Dharma. So Pak Dwi Jatmoko, for example, is a colleague of mine, was a classmate back then. Pak Dwi, congratulations on your retirement and happy retirement for you. Pak Paulus Sarwoto, good to see you, Pak, and Pak Mukarto as well. Always a very pleasant experience for me to meet people whom I know very well, people who have done a lot of good work in the area of language education in Yogyakarta and also in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying just one or two sentences about my university. The name of the university is Nanyang Technological University. It is a very good university, and more importantly, for those of you from Indonesia and also from overseas, in Indonesia in particular, this is an LPDP approved university. So if you're applying for a scholarship from the government of Indonesia, I think you can do that and mention or choose NTU, Nanyang Technological University, as your choice for your further studies. And I belong to the School of Education. And the name of the School of Education is the National Institute of Education. This is the only one teacher education institution in Singapore, and that's why it's the number one, the only one and the number one, and it's also the best in Singapore. There's no competition there. So everyone who wants to become a teacher in Singapore schools, they have to come and study with us, maybe for 4 years, or maybe for another 2 years if they're interested in doing their masters, and another 2 more years maybe if you want to do your doctorate in language education, in applied linguistics, and in other areas of education. The topic today is very, very exciting, and I hope you'll be very excited too after listening to my presentation. And going forward, you will also be interested in actually doing research in this topic and also maybe applying this in your teaching when you start teaching or when you are already teaching in schools or in other language institutions. Let me begin by sharing with you the most important takeaway of today's lesson or today's presentation. I'm not teaching a group of today's presentation. Yeah. Now, this is the main takeaway. And I want you to remember this. I want you to memorize this. And hopefully after listening to my presentation, you will also be saying the same thing. And you will also be sharing this good news to a lot of people out there. That extensive listening and extensive reading is perhaps the best way to improve language proficiency. For many years, we've been trying to find, one of the best ways or one of the best methods, if you like, for helping our students develop a higher level of proficiency. I think now we have found it. And the name of that method or the name of that approach is extensive reading and extensive listening. So today I'm going to share with you basically 2 things. Number one, what is extensive reading and listening and why is it important? What is the theory behind it? And what is the research that has been conducted for the past 20, 30 years that provide evidence to you, to me, and to everyone that extensive reading and extensive listening is one area that is worth exploring for your research and also something that is worth exploring for your own teaching when you try to help your students develop a higher level of English language proficiency or any other language proficiency. And then I'll move on to some potential applications or evidence-based application, if you like, and after that, question and answer. But during my presentation, please do feel free to raise your hand, to interrupt me, and to ask questions. I will be more than happy to respond to your questions. Yeah, interruption is very good, actually. Okay. Now here is how I would start my presentation. I would like to present to you the theory and the research, or in other words, the what and the why of extensive reading and extensive listening. A very simple definition of extensive reading and extensive listening is this. Extensive reading and listening is about reading and listening for pleasure or for recreation. Extremely important. Now, most of the time, this is done outside the classroom. But the classroom plays an important part as well, because if you are able to send a very strong message to your students that reading and listening is a lot of fun to do, is pleasurable, is a pleasurable activity, then chances are higher that they will take it one step further. They will go outside the classroom and they will start doing the reading and the listening on their own. Yeah? As long as the activity is pleasurable, something that makes you happy, something that makes you excited, that usually is associated with extensive reading and extensive listening. Number two, extensive reading and listening is not about reading or listening for detailed information. No, it's not for the kind of reading activities that we teachers normally do in the classroom. We give our students a reading passage, very short, very difficult, frustratingly difficult for most students. And then after that, you give them a lot of questions, the kind of questions that ask for very, very detailed information about that reading passage. That is not extensive reading, and that is not extensive listening. Yeah? So it's reading and listening for just a broad-based kind of information. Like when you read a newspaper, for example, if you want to find out about the COVID situation in Indonesia, for example, do you read every single detail that is in there? Probably not. You just read it very quickly, then you want to find out that, okay, the situation is better now than yesterday. That's all you need to know. So it's reading and listening for general information. When you read a novel, for example, yeah, a murder mystery, for example, do you want to remember the nitty-gritty things like the name of the street or the size of the house? You don't. You want to find out what is going to happen to the person who is guilty. Yeah, who is the bad guy, who is the good guy, and things like that. So reading and listening for general information. And the next one, the last one, basically is to reiterate what I said earlier on. Extensive reading and extensive listening is not for study purposes. You read and you listen not because you want to do an exam, for example. You are preparing for a big test tomorrow. No, that is not extensive reading, and that is not extensive listening. I hope that makes sense, yeah? Okay, let's take it one step further and examine the kind of things associated with extensive reading and extensive listening. First, let's focus on the content. The content will have to be very, very interesting. The content will have to be very, very exciting. This is the kind of reading and listening that you begin, and you don't want to stop doing it until you get to the end, because the content is so interesting. You stay doing it, you continue reading and listening, maybe for 2 hours, maybe for 3 hours, maybe for the whole night, because the content is interesting. That is extensive reading. It's not like studying a chapter, an academic chapter from a book, for example. That is different, yeah? For example, when Pak Paulus gives you an assignment, for example, the analysis of Charles Dickens, for example, and he gave you a big, assignment, a chapter that you have to read. You start with the first page, and when you get to page number 3, you fall asleep, right? And then you stop doing it. But that is not, it's not a bad thing, because that is reading for a different purpose. For extensive reading and listening, it has to be so interesting that you stay awake pretty much the whole night, because you want to get to the end of the story. Next, another important dimension is this: the language, the bahasa, the linguistic element will have to be accessible. Accessible is another word for comprehensible. You read and you listen and you understand almost everything. You don't have to ask questions to somebody, to your teachers. You don't have to look it up in a dictionary if you encounter unfamiliar words, for example. Yeah. There may be one or two words that you are not familiar, but that's okay. But the key thing here is the language will have to be accessible, will have to be comprehensible. And I'm going to use this word that many people don't like, but I like the word very much, is the word easy. The language will have to be easy. If something is interesting and the content is interesting, the language is easy, chances are higher that we will continue doing it for a longer period of time. And that is what extensive reading and listening is all about. The next one is self-selection. It's about choice. Yeah. Remember that in the classroom, students are rarely given choices. Almost everything is decided by who? By Pak Paulus, the teacher, by Pak Mukarto, the teacher. The students have very little choice, actually. Now, extensive reading and listening is different. It is about the kind of reading and listening that the students really, really want to do. So they can choose what they want to read, they can choose what they want to listen to. And finally, now this is probably the most important thing, because the word extensive means massive. The word extensive means a lot. The word extensive means that the reading and listening will have to be done in large quantity. And this is the most important part, because when the students do read a great deal and listen a great deal in large quantity, that is how they actually learn a lot from their reading and from their listening. Something that I'm going to explain next. In other words, the benefits, the language learning benefits from extensive reading and extensive listening is possible when the students have done a lot of reading, a lot of listening. A lot means a lot. Reading one book, nothing. It's not a bad thing for you to read one book. It's a good thing. But if you expect your English language proficiency to improve after you finish reading one book, I think that is not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you're looking for the theory behind what I just discussed, so what is the theory out there? I'm going to use a very simple language, actually. Yeah. And the theory says we can acquire language from reading, and we can acquire language from listening. If we do both, I think we can learn more. If we can learn more from reading and also from listening. If you have done your course in language acquisition, for example, you may have heard about the term language input or comprehensible input. Now, comprehensible input essentially is translated into reading and listening. Not just reading one single passage, not just listening to somebody's speech, but doing it over a period of time. So the theory behind this is actually the comprehension hypothesis. But what do we learn from reading and listening, actually? Okay, let's take it one step further and talk about things that we get benefit from doing reading, a lot of reading and a lot of listening. Yeah, remember when I say reading and listening, I'm referring to a lot of reading and a lot of listening. Three major benefits. The first one is the language benefit, the language learning benefits. The first one is the linguistic benefit. The second one is the cognitive benefit, the thinking bit. And then the last one is the affective benefit, the emotional bit, the motivation bit. Yeah, three very important areas of language development, language learning. What sort of linguistic benefit you can get from reading and listening? Very easy. Because when you learn a language, you need words. You need a lot of words. And when you read and when you listen, you get to see, you get to hear words. Now, if you see and hear these words every day for one whole year, what happens? You remember those words. And that is how you learn vocabulary. That's how you develop your vocabulary. Yeah? So your word knowledge increases, improves a great deal. Your knowledge about the grammar of the language also improves a great deal. When you read, when you see words, phrases, clauses, sentences, and so on, you are also seeing the grammar of the language. So think about this very carefully, because most of us often think about grammar in terms of relative clauses, in terms of subject-verb agreement, in terms of, noun phrases or adverbial clauses and things like that. But that is a different kind of grammar. And that kind of grammar is useful for certain things, but not for others. That kind of grammar is useful when you take an examination, a written examination that tests your grammar knowledge, then that is useful. But when it comes to using the language for talking, for writing, that is not very useful. I hope a lot of people will be telling you that. I remember when I was a student many years ago, I attended so many classes, so many courses on grammar. Did it help me with my knowledge of the grammar of the language? The answer is yes, it did. But it stays there as knowledge. Did it get translated into my ability to speak? I don't think so. Maybe I would say about 10 to 20%, and not more than that. Text structure, that is another important thing. I think many of you are familiar with the genre-based approach, yeah? The text-based approach to language teaching. Now, when you read, you encounter this structure. You see this structure in a narrative, in a recount, in an argumentative essay. The same thing when you listen to somebody doing a presentation, you also get to notice the structure of the presentation. So everything that you ever need is there in the reading and in the listening. The key thing is you have to do it every day. You have to do it on a regular basis. You have to do it over a period of time. Number one. Number two, thinking, cognitive. Yeah. What happens to the other part of your brain? Not the linguistic part of the brain, but the cognitive part of the brain. World knowledge, extremely important in almost anything related to education and related to life, basically. If you read a great deal, your knowledge of the world also increases a great deal. And we know that knowledge is important. The reason why it is difficult for you to understand Shakespeare, for example, or Charles Dickens, or those big names in literature, is because you don't have sufficient knowledge of the world. You don't know the history. You don't know the culture. You don't know the things that these people from long ago did in UK, in the US, or in many other places in the world. So lack of world knowledge becomes a real big issue here. And the only way you can improve, develop your knowledge is, yes, listening to your lecturers, for example, yes, but how much? How much information, how much knowledge you can get from other people? Not much. You have to read, you have to listen on your own for a longer period of time. Yeah. You're also worried that students need help in being able to think critically, in being able to make inferences, and in being able to answer all these wonderful higher order questions that teachers usually ask in the reading lessons or in the listening lessons. Doing extensive reading and extensive listening will help you a great deal, or will help your students a great deal in being able to make all these wonderful things that happen in your head, making inferences, making all the wonderful connections that you have in your head. I have not seen anyone, no one, who has done a great deal of listening and reading, and they are severely disadvantaged when they take a big language examinations. No one. I have yet to find somebody who have difficulty, who are struggling, doing a good job in TOEFL tests or in IELTS tests, after they have done a lot of reading, after they have done a lot of listening. The last one is affective. Now, this one is extremely important. Learning is about the desire. Learning is about having enough motivation to do something and to continue doing it over a period of time. And that is where motivation comes into the picture. And extensive reading and listening is about reading for pleasure, reading for enjoyment, listening for enjoyment. And chances are students will become motivated and they'll be able to sustain their motivation over a longer period of time if they find what they do is interesting, is pleasurable, and enjoyable. Okay, in other words, to summarize, these benefits that I just shared with you translate to students' ability to read and to listen more fluently. Now, this may sound a bit strange to you because fluency is usually associated with speaking and writing. But if you look at the professional literature, you will find that reading fluency is very important. Listening fluency is also extremely important. In fact, fluency comes before comprehension. Now, what happens is that if your fluency improves a great deal, your comprehension also improves a great deal. So this is one side of the story, that listening, doing a lot of listening, doing a lot of reading actually improves your fluency and improves your comprehension. Is that all? No. And I'm going to share with you very soon the additional benefits of doing a lot of reading and a lot of listening. But let's find out what this person says about the importance of reading. She is a novelist and she has written many, best-selling novels. Her advice is this. It's a very simple piece of advice. Basically, she is talking about extensive reading. Yeah, but she's not using the word because she's not in language education. She is just a normal person, who does a lot of, writing, writes a lot of novels. And that's what she says. Read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. I think you encounter very often in your classrooms, for example, that your students struggle a great deal because they're not fluent. Because the words are there in their head, but the words are somehow stuck in their head. The words don't flow like a river. I think what she is saying is that if you read a great deal, and I would say if you listen a great deal, I think your words will flow very nicely when you read, when you write, and also when you speak. So here is the bonus for you. If you have become a fluent reader, a good comprehender, then chances are there's a possibility that your writing ability will also improve. So I can see here the connection between reading and writing. Okay? Listening, if you do a good job listening, doing a lot of pleasure, extensive listening, chances are higher that you will also be able to develop a higher level of fluency in speaking. If you need something more substantial, somebody who has been, saying about the importance of input in language education is Professor Stephen Krashen. And this is what he says about the importance of reading and how it relates to writing. Kartika, are you there, Kartika? Kartika is the MC, right?
Yeah, I'm here. But
Kartika, yes. Kartika, can you read this slowly?
Okay.
For the audience, yeah? Read it slowly.
When enough reading is done, all the necessary grammatical structures and discourse rules for writing will automatically be presented to the writer in sufficient quantity. Okay,
what is he saying actually? What he's saying is that if you read and read and read and read and read for a period of time, you will have seen all those words, you will have seen all those sentences, all the clauses, all the text structure, discourse structure. Yeah? And these things will stay in your head, and later when it comes, the time for you to start writing, it flows very nicely because you have seen it many, many times. That's what it says. What about listening? Now, Stephen Krashen is not a big person on listening. He focuses mostly on reading. And because of that, I borrow his words exactly the same words, and that is what I would say about listening as well. And I'm going to read this to you, yeah? When enough listening is done, now the key word here is enough listening is done, all the necessary grammatical structures, vocabulary as well, and discourse rules, structure, organization for speaking will automatically be presented to the speaker in sufficient quantity. So I hope you can see now the link between reading and writing, and listening and speaking. Okay? Okay, now I'm going to take it one step further, a little bit technical, but not very technical. What I'm describing now is the language acquisition process from the beginning to the end, where you are expected, or your students are expected to be able to speak and to write fluently. Technically, that's called output or language output, yeah? Now, for that to be possible, to be achievable, what do you need? You need a lot of input. There you go. Are you with me, yeah? So the input actually gets translated into listening and reading, seeing and hearing. Now, listening and reading will have to be done in a certain way. Otherwise, your brains will not be effective in processing the input. Okay, the reading and listening will have to be easy, will have to be enjoyable. Later at the end of the session, please ask me why easy, okay? I want you to think about this, because many teachers think that when you teach a lesson, it has to be difficult. But what I'm saying now, no, it has to be easy. The easier, the better, okay? Please ask me later. Kartika, remind me, yeah? Ask me why easy. What do you learn, if anything, if things that you do when you listen and you read is easy? Then what do you learn out of it? The next one is that it has to be available in large quantity, because the word extensive means quantity, and also frequency. Frequency means you have to see it like as often as possible and on a regular basis as well. If you want something more concrete, half an hour a day. Can I say that again? Half an hour a day, at least. More is good, less is not good, yeah? Half an hour a day reading and listening to whatever that you enjoy doing over a 1-year period. And something magical will happen to you and also to your students. And when you do that, then something in your brain will appear, and that is known as the linguistic system of the target language. You already have the linguistic system in your first language, or maybe in your second language, but this is the new language that you are learning. You will have something there in your head. It's called the acquired linguistic system. So far, so good? Okay. The question for us is this. What does it look like? Do we know what it looks like in our head? We don't know exactly. We don't know 100%, but researchers have sort of, after doing a lot of research, after doing a lot of observation, investigation, and all that, they have come to the conclusion that this is what the linguistic system is like. Now, these are the characteristics of the linguistic systems that you have acquired, that you have developed as a result of doing a lot of listening and as a result of doing a lot of reading. Kartika, are you still there, Kartika?
I'm here, sir.
Yes, Kartika, are you a teacher or a student?
I am a teacher and also I am a student.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
A teacher and a student at the same time. It's only possible when you are a graduate student, yeah? Kartika, please read this again for us.
Okay. Acquired linguistic system. This complex and implicit system is not dependent on learner practice of language, but rather is dependent on exposure to what is called input.
Yes, essentially that is what I said earlier on, yeah? Input is responsible for the development of this linguistic system, And this linguistic system is, number one, complex, and number two, implicit. Let me explain. Complex here means complex. Complex means here that linguists or even the world-class experts have yet to know exactly what it looks like. It's so complex that we can't possibly describe it. I know linguists try usually to describe a language, yeah, in terms of its linguistic elements, in terms of its sound system, in terms of its grammatical structures and things like that, but that is only very, very superficial. But the acquired system is much more complex than that. And what I want to say here is that complex does not mean that it's difficult, no, to learn. Complex doesn't mean that it's difficult to acquire. If this linguistic system is so difficult, then nobody is able to speak any language. Yeah? The fact that a lot of people can speak Bahasa Indonesia or Tagalog or any other languages means that this language is complex but easy to acquire. The same thing with learning a new language like English or French or Korean or any other languages. The second part is most important for us. The word implicit is extremely important. Think about implicit as the opposite of the kind of things that we usually do in the classroom. What you do in the classroom when you explain grammatical features, when you explain different types of text, for example, to your students, that is not implicit. That is explicit knowledge of the language. Yeah, students may be able to tell you what the present tense is, what a past perfect tense is, what a noun clause is. They may be able to explain that to you because they have acquired that knowledge explicitly. But that is not the kind of knowledge that is needed for people to communicate, to use what they have learned, what they have acquired in real communication, in speaking and in writing. Okay? Now, the word language practice here refers to the kind of things that we normally do with the students. Now, here is 10 questions about the present tense. Please indicate which part is incorrect. That is language practice. Yeah. Now, here are 10 passive sentences. Please turn these passive sentences into active sentences. That is language practice. That is not the kind of knowledge that is useful for the development of this linguistic system that allows you to produce language for real communication. Next, here is a just further confirmation of the importance of the implicit knowledge. Esther Deborah, can you turn on your microphone, please?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I think you've been looking at me, waiting for me to call your name so that I will ask you to read. Esther, please read this for me. Yeah, this comes from a book, and the book is very important for you to get hold of. It's about the theory of language learning, language acquisition, instructed second language acquisition.
Yeah.
Esther, please read this. Are you a teacher or a student?
I'm a teacher and a student as well.
Okay, do you teach at Sanata Dharma as well?
Oh, no, I teach in an elementary school.
Okay,
yeah.
That's a lot of fun. Yes, please read this.
Yeah.
Now, this part is particularly important when you teach elementary school kids.
All right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ability to produce language relatively easily for communicative purposes draws heavily on implicit knowledge.
Okay, I think all of you here will have to remember this, will have to memorize this.
Yeah.
Because this is what language learning should be. Language learning in the classroom and also outside the classroom is for the students to develop this implicit knowledge of the language, not the explicit knowledge of the language. Explicit knowledge is only important for Pak Mukarto, for me, for you if you are a teacher. For students, maybe they need like 10%, maybe 15%, but not more than that. But what often happens is that we essentially teach our students with all this explicit knowledge of the language, hoping that one day the students will be able to make use of this explicit knowledge for writing, for speaking, for chatting, and for doing other things with the language, yeah? So again, the most important word here is implicit knowledge of the language, not explicit knowledge of the language. Maybe you are thinking, yes, but really that's very theoretical. You know, I've seen something like that before. Do you have any practical real-life example? The answer is yes. This is a real-life example as reported by a researcher. Yeah, and the researchers here are interested in understanding, in finding out what highly successful English language learners did when they were, learning the language. Now, the study involves a small number of very, very successful learners of English in China. These are high school students who have reached a very high level of English in China. And they took part in a lot of competition, and they won first place or second place. Now remember, China is such a big country, yeah? If you are good, you are really, really very good because you're competing with million other people. If you are number one in Yogyakarta, for example, then maybe you are competing with maybe 100,000 people. But in China, you're competing with millions other students. So these are winners of national English language competition. And when they were interviewed, they said that, well, I spend many, many hours. That will have to be outside the classroom, yeah? You cannot do it inside the classroom. The number of hours in the classroom is not enough. And this is what they said again. They spend a lot of time, many, many hours, doing the same thing. Listening and listening and listening and listening and listening. And their speaking ability improves a great deal because of that. Now here is what some of the girls said in response to the questions by the researchers. Very common, yeah? At the very early stage of learning, I was slow in the beginning. When I listen, I don't really understand, and I had to listen it many, many more times. And after a while, things become easier. So it's a normal process. Now, interestingly, this is something that is often not possible in the classroom. You have to do it outside the classroom, extra hours that you need to spend. Now, gradually, after 1 week, after 1 month, after a few months, I begin to develop some feel for the language. Deborah, feel of the language. What is the technical term for feel of the language? I'm giving you a quiz now.
Is it implicit knowledge, sir?
Exactly, yes, you passed. Yeah. Yes, Pak Paulus, please give her a good mark.
It's a privilege for me, sir, because in Pak Mukarto's class,
Yes.
I get to present your material with Clara about extensive reading.
Very good, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
yes, now the message for you is do not use the word implicit with your students.
All right,
but
sir.
words like feel, words like intuition,
Instinct, sir.
instinct, that's okay, yeah? The word implicit is for people like me, for Pak Paulus, Pak Mukarto, and things like that.
All right.
So feel. And this is what she says. I feel that I just have countless patterns sort of swimming around in my head. Patterns, a lot of patterns, language patterns, swimming, not literally, but swimming in my head. Lines from movies often naturally pop out. Muncul begitu saja. Because you have seen it many, many times, you have heard it many, many times, yeah? Again, quiz for you, Deborah. Patterns. What do patterns mean here?
Explicit knowledge.
No. Patterns here is not explicit knowledge. Cannot be explicit knowledge, no. Yeah. What is it? Is it vocabulary? Is it grammar? Or is it both? Second chance now for you, Deborah.
I think it's grammar.
Please say both.
Sure.
Shh, please say both.
Both then.
Yes, it's both.
Thank you for the quiz, sir.
Yes, a good
Refresh
teacher.
my knowledge.
Yes, a good teacher always gives students opportunities to give a good answer. The answer is both. Yeah, this patterns actually that the girl is referring to refers to grammar basically. And this grammar is special. This grammar has grammatical structures, and this grammar also has vocabulary in it. And it's got a name, and that name is lexical bundles or lexical chunks. These are words that come in groups, they travel in groups, they very often are used together, and they don't change very much. Now, these are known as lexical chunks. Now, these are also known as patterns. These are also known as grammar, also known as vocabulary. So everything, basically. Here are some examples just to help you understand what it means. Yeah, it's extremely important. The word make do. Make it up. I'm sorry. Let me make it up to you later tonight. You can make fun of me all you want. Make my day. All these expressions are, they travel together in a bundle like that. Make up your mind. Deborah, make up your mind. Do you want to finish this year or next year? Please make up your mind. You just say it together. You don't even think about what is the grammar, what is the tenses here. You don't. They just come to you just like that. Now, here are some other examples. Yeah. Now, this one's on me. Pak Mukarto, when we meet again in Yogyakarta, please take me to a nice restaurant. But the bill is on you, yeah? That means you are paying, not me. It was lovely to see you. Thanks for coming. I don't believe a word of it, and many other instances. Okay, let me stop here for a while. Research tells us very, very clearly that competent speakers, proficient speakers of the language have hundreds, if not thousands of these fixed expressions in their head. Let me say this again, because this is extremely important. If you think that what you have in your heads are rules of grammar, rules, all the 100 or 1,000 rules of the English language, I think you are mistaken. Because what we have in our heads are these phrases. They are fixed, they travel together, and when you need them, you just use them just like that. You don't analyze them, actually. Yeah? So very important for you to remember that competent speakers, that the acquired system that you have in your head is implicit, number one, and number two, a lot of that knowledge is in the form of fixed expressions, formulaic expressions, or lexical bundles, and all these things are implicit in nature. You don't analyze them. Okay? Now, if you're looking for something more substantial in terms of research evidence, I have two here to share with you. Both were published in very high-profile journals in our field, TESOL Quarterly and Reading in a Foreign Language. If you love numbers, now there are some numbers. The effect size is quite okay, quite substantial. So these are both are meta-analysis studies. Meta-analysis studies are summary or synthesis of research done in the past, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. Now, the summary of this research shows that the impact of reading, nothing on listening yet, because listening is fairly recent, but in terms of reading, the effect size is quite substantial. If you don't like numbers, if you don't like reading professional, literature, academic literature, because they're not easy to read, you may want to find out for yourself by talking to people, by talking to your students, especially the top students that you have in your classroom or in your school, the top one, the top 5% or the top 10%, and they will tell you the same thing, that they are very good because they have done a lot of reading. They are good because they have done a lot of listening. And here are some examples. These are real people. Name is Sodam from Korea. When she was in primary school, in elementary school, she started reading in grade 4. And by the time she was in grade 8, in grade 8, she had read something like 1,000 books. and her proficiency in the English language is just like all those girls that I shared with you from China earlier on. Maybe you are thinking, well, people from China are very talented. People from Korea are very talented. That's not true, because language learning has very little to do with talent. Language learning has a lot to do with the time that you spend doing the right kind of things. Now, here's another example from Thailand. Thailand is very much like Indonesia. English is not used, not in the classroom, very rarely, not outside the classroom. But this girl, whom I met about 3 or 4 years ago, she was attending my special class when I was teaching in Thailand. And she stood up almost immediately because her English language proficiency was just wonderful. And she said, when I interviewed her, that she watched a lot of Disney cartoons. Look at this, you don't have to spend a lot of money, you know, attending extra lessons by, I don't know, EF or some other top language learning providers. Just doing a lot of something fun, like watching movies, Disney cartoons, is what you need to develop your proficiency. Here is another example from Vietnam. I know the parents, I know the boy. They don't speak English at home, but this boy was able to develop a high level of English language proficiency. His IELTS score was 7.5 and almost 8 actually. And here is an important person. You should know her. She teaches at Sanata Dharma. And the name is, what is the name again? Pak Muk, siapa namanya ya Pak Muk? Pak Paulus, namanya siapa ya ini? What's the name again? Ah, Bu Mita. Please don't tell her that I forgot her name, okay? Bu Mita.
Yeah, Pak.
Bu Mita is very, very good. You know, she is very fluent. She is very articulate. I think she carries herself well in her English language, performance. I did a joint presentation with her several times, and every time she did a very, very good job. Very fluent, very proficient. Here is another teacher from Malang, University of Malang. Also very good. And she said that she watched a lot of movies. Now this movie is very, very old, like in the 70s. But that's what she did. That's how she got started in doing a lot of viewing, a lot of watching movies back then. Now this is my favorite teacher from Vietnam. Not China, okay? This is from Vietnam. I met her in a classroom when I was giving a workshop to a group of language teachers from Vietnam. And again, she stood out almost immediately when the moment she started, asking questions in my class. I was so impressed. I pulled her out and I had a chat with her. I asked her how she developed such a high level of English language proficiency. The answer, very simple. She did a lot of reading when she was in SMP, in a secondary school. And this is what she said that helps me understand the power of reading and also later the power of listening as well. Yeah, reading makes reading easier, and reading makes writing also easier. That is something that is so insightful, that is so useful for me to relate to. Okay, so that is the theory bit, yeah? The research, the theory, again, very briefly, extensive reading and extensive listening are linked to a very specific theory in language acquisition, and the theory is known as Comprehensible Input hypothesis. And the theory says that if students do a lot of easy, comprehensible, interesting reading and listening on a regular basis over a period of time, I think there's a good chance that they will be able to develop a high level of English language proficiency. So that is the first part. The second part of my presentation is about applications. Now this part is very easy. Hopefully it flows nicely from our discussion earlier on. Number one. Application number one is this, very, very simple. When we teach listening, when you teach reading in the classroom, I think you need to increase the amount of time that the students actually spend doing the actual reading and doing the actual listening. I'm saying this because what I often see is that in a 60-minute reading lesson, the students don't do a lot of reading actually, but they do a lot of exercises. They do a lot of activities related to reading or listening. I don't think that's the way to go. I think we have to be very clear about what we do in the classroom. Are we helping students to develop their English language proficiency? If that is the answer, then the best thing for you to do will be to increase the amount of time that the students actually read and listen in the classroom. I think we have been wasting a lot of time doing a lot of warm-up activities, doing a lot of guessing activities, doing a lot of question answering activities in the classroom. What I'm saying is reduce, cut it to half, or reduce it to, what would be a good percentage? Reduce it to maybe 25%. Yeah, the rest of the time will be something related to the actual reading, actual listening, and if you can provoke your students, get them to be excited, get them to be more curious about the content so that they will explore additional reading and additional listening beyond what is available in the classroom. And they'll be very, very good at exploring using the internet to bring in a lot of materials, in reading materials and listening materials in the classroom. Okay, so that is lesson number 1. Please keep that in mind. Deborah, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question for you. My first point about application is reflected in one of the two pictures here. Which one is it? Picture number 1 or picture number 2? Now, both are reading lessons. The first picture is, of course, more colorful, it's looking more modern. The second one is not as modern because it's happening in a very, low resource country. But both are supposed to be a reading lesson.
I think it's number 2.
Say it again, you're not very confident, Deborah. Please say.
Number 2.
Please say out loud.
Yeah, it's number 2.
Yes, it's number 2. In number 2, you actually get to see that the students are actually doing the reading in the classroom. Yeah. And that's what we want our students to be doing, yeah? Doing a lot of reading in the classroom. Lah, kalau begitu, if that happens, then the classroom is very quiet. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Deborah? The classroom is very quiet. The teachers are not talking and the students are very quiet doing, the reading. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
For me, it's a good thing. Because
it is a very good thing because that is how you
understand what they are reading.
Yes. Yes, it helps the students to develop their reading skills because the best way to develop reading skills is by reading, not by listening to the explanation of the teacher. So the kids there are doing, what I'm suggesting, what I'm recommending to you today. The first picture is okay, but again, reduce that activity to no more than 25%. If the students are thinking very hard when they're still at the very low level of proficiency, I don't think that's going to be helpful. If anything, they will feel very tired. If anything, they will be very bored. If anything, they will say to themselves quietly in their head, I hate the teacher. The teacher is making me work really hard in the classroom. Number 2. Application number 2, very straightforward. Bring the joy back of reading and listening into the classroom. How do you do that? Use easier and more enjoyable reading and listening materials. Again, that is the second time that you are hearing the word easier materials into the classroom. Easy and enjoyable, because that enjoyable is that element is extremely important. If something is not enjoyable, then students will not be mentally active. They will not be emotionally active. And we know, if you have been teaching for a while, then you know that when the students are not mentally active, not emotionally active, they're not learning anything. They may be looking at you, pretending to be paying attention, but actually they're not there. They're somewhere else. Yeah? So keep that in mind. And think about tasks that promote more. So think about a question, think about an activity that will get the students to be, I need to know this. There's something that the teacher said that I need to find out more about. You have to provoke your students. You have to create this feeling that the students feel that I need to know that. When that happens, I think the students will spend a lot more time doing the reading, both in the classroom, and you can be sure that they will continue reading outside their classroom without you asking them to do it. That, to me, is very, very important. Next one is this. Yeah, reading strategies, listening strategies. Can you teach them? The answer is yes, you can. But again, reduce to a minimum. Minimum. Minimum means not more than 25% of your time. In other words, teach less, not more. Because the best way for the students to develop their reading skill and listening skills is for them to actually do the reading and the listening. Not for you to tell them, to teach them, all these wonderful strategies, inferencing strategies, knowledge activation strategies, and things like that. Reduce that to a minimum. Yeah? So spend less time teaching comprehension strategies like predicting, guessing meanings from context and things like that. Guessing meaning is a fun activity, but I don't think it's extremely useful where language learning is concerned. Because chances are, most of the time the students will guess wrong. I can guarantee you that when you do a guessing activity in the classroom, most of the time the students will guess wrong. Plus, you don't really have to teach them how to guess because they are guessing anyway. And that is part of the natural process of thinking of, especially not for lower proficiency students. I have an example here. Now, this piece of research, I can send it to you if you are interested. I hope some of you are interested because this is a recently published research article on listening. 2021, and it appeared in one of the top journals in our field. The name is Language Teaching Research. Very, very interesting. The two researchers are actually language teachers. They are English teachers teaching in Japan. I know one of them. I know the main speaker, Brett Milner. I met him a couple of times. And the research to me is very interesting. Yeah, the researchers are interested in finding out whether teaching listening strategies to lower proficiency students. In Japan, there's a lot of lower proficiency students who are at the A1, A2 level, whether teaching them strategies will help them improve on their listening ability. So that is the main research questions. Now here is the design. Number of participants, about 130 college students, non-English major, yeah? Level is about CFR A2, pretty low level, elementary, basic. And then these 128 students were divided into 3 groups. The first group is the strategy plus some listening input. The second group is given strategy training only. And the last group is the normal group, the control group. They're not given anything. They just follow the usual, listening classes, listening instruction in the classroom. The results, very interesting. Deborah, do you want to make a guess? Deborah?
Yep.
You want to guess the results?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's group 1.
Group 1 is better
Yeah.
than group 2, then group 3. No. Look at that. The control group outperformed or did better than the 2 experimental groups. Very, very interesting. Which confirm my prediction, which confirm my hypothesis actually, that for lower proficiency students, you don't You don't need to. You don't have to. You should not be teaching too much strategies to your students. Now, this is what the results look like. Yeah, as usual in an experiment, you have the pre-test and you have the post-test as well, yeah? Pre-test and post-test. And you expect the students to perform better at the post-test. The pre-test a bit low and post-test a bit high, right? That's not what happens. Clara, please pay attention. That's not what happens. There you go. The two experimental students actually perform lower at the post-test, and the strategy group also perform lower at the post-test. What about the control group? Hey, the control group did better. Now, this to me is very interesting. In other words, your teaching is harmful. When you teach students, lower proficiency students, all these wonderful things about strategies, actually the effect is negative. Yeah, so be very careful. I like this study because the two researchers actually cited me and tested my hypothesis, because I said in one of my papers that teaching lower proficiency students listening strategies is not very useful. I did not use the word a waste of time, but I said it's not very useful. And that is, you know, an interesting evidence. Instead, I would suggest something like this: listening, a lot of listening, and also a lot of reading. This is what happens in a lot of Singapore schools, of students in primary schools in particular. They spend time actually doing the actual reading in the classroom. Next one is this. Next application. If you want to keep your students doing things, doing activities, I would suggest activities like this. Shadowing. Extremely useful, extremely powerful technique to improve students' listening comprehension and also to improve students' speaking ability in the long run. So shadowing basically is as you listen, you say the words, you say the sentences almost immediately. That is shadowing, yeah? Repeated reading, repeated listening, things that the student should be doing again and again. I think that is something that you can think about. Reading while listening is also very good. Anything that provides students with opportunities to do the same thing again, of course with some motivation, of course, I think they will be able to learn a lot more from your lesson. Now here is an example of the power of shadowing. Now shadowing, interestingly, is not very popular. Many teachers don't know about this, but here is a real life example of people like him, this guy, who is a polyglot. A polyglot is somebody who is very fluent in 10, 20 languages. Now this guy is fluent in 50 languages. And what did he do to, pick up a new language? Shadowing. That's what he said. So shadowing is one technique that many successful learners, real life learners of language actually do. Next. Now the next question, the next application has to do with motivation. Now one concern that I often hear from teachers is this: yeah, but Willy, I know reading is good by my students, but my students are not motivated. What can I do? My answer to that is they are not motivated because you are not motivating. Of course, then they unfriend me because they're not happy with me. But that is a true story. That is really true. The students are not motivated, not because they're not motivated, but because your activities are not interesting, because your teaching method is not motivating. You yourself as a teacher is not inspiring. So think about that very carefully. Do not be too quick to say, do not be too quick to judge that your students are not motivated. I think they are motivated. We just don't know how to motivate them. Again, my experience and the experience of many other people is this: if you want your students to be a reader, to be an interested, motivated reader, then you should become a reader yourself and become a model. Show your students that you enjoy reading, then you enjoy doing a lot of listening. When you come When you walk into the classroom, every time you walk into the classroom, bring a book that you actually are reading, yeah? Not just pretend reading, but a real book that you actually enjoy reading, and show your enthusiasm. Show how happy you are when you are holding that book. And true enough, the students will be very, very interested and motivated, because students look up to you, as they should, yeah? If the teachers do something that is fun and enjoyable, then students will also be doing the same thing. So, don't say that your students don't like to read. I don't believe that. What happens is that, students have not found the books that they want to read. Let me give you a real-life example here. They have not found the books that they want to read. And this happened at least to one boy whom I know very well. Now, this boy, when he was in SMP, when he was in secondary school, he did not enjoy reading. I took him to the library, to the public library, but he still did not pick up any books from the library. He would prefer doing anything other than reading. Until one day, one of his teachers walks into the classroom with a book in his hand. And the teacher starts telling what is inside the story to the class. My boy got very excited, got very interested. He came back home and asked me to buy all the books written by the same author that the teacher brought into the classroom. So the power of the teacher in modeling, in motivating the students. So I spent a lot of money buying all the 50 books by the same author like this one. Now, so if you want to find out whether your students, the kind of books that the students read, I think you need to ask them. It's a very simple question. Do a survey and find out what your students really want to read, and then make those books available. Now, this is what happened in Singapore. A colleague of mine gave a survey to 2,000 plus students. These are all teenagers. And they were asked what books they wanted to read. And these are some of the books that they wanted to read. Very, very exciting, very, very interesting books. However, now these books are very often not available in the school library. And the teachers keep complaining, my students don't like to read. They do, they actually want to read books, but these books are usually not available in the library. So, I'm coming to the end of my presentation now. Yes, but really what you're saying is true. Yes, but it's difficult, isn't it, to do extensive reading and extensive listening. Now, these are some of the concerns that teachers usually have. No books, no time. Some people are still not sure whether does it really work? Will it help my students pass the big examinations? And there are many other concerns that teachers might have. Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, and many other places. They always ask me these, questions. And because of that, I've written a small chapter, a small paper, and you can download this from my website, which I'm going to show it to you later. 10 concerns, 10 questions that teachers often have about extensive reading. And one of the things that they always say is that, we work in a small village or in a small town and books are not available. That is not true, because books are available if only you know where to find those books. So I'm going to show you some examples of books that are available for free for you to read, download, and share with your students. This one is from Asia Foundation. And these are some of the books that have been made available. And many more are being produced. Yeah? Free, accessible. And what you need is just internet connection, basically, and the website address. And you'll be able to read all these wonderful stories, or you can ask students to read the stories for themselves. And there are many other resources out there on the internet. I'll be happy to share with you in another opportunity. But if you are very busy, if your schools have resources, I would recommend I would recommend that your schools subscribe to this library. This is a digital library, and then it's a digital library. It's called X Reading. It has more than 1,500 graded reading materials. You can find the easiest reading materials, very interesting reading materials written in a very simple language. You can also find reading materials that are at a more advanced level. Yeah? And the key thing here to remember is this, because everything is digital, you can read online and you can also listen online. So it's a wonderful, wonderful resource if you want to apply extensive reading and extensive listening at the same time. And if you want your students to reap the benefits, then this, X Reading is for you. It comes complete with a learning management system. So it's a real library. It's better than a real library, actually, because the teachers can do a lot of things. The teachers can monitor the students can track students' progress, the teacher can assess students' understanding, and can guide the students in selecting the kind of books that they want to read. Yeah, so the name again is X Reading. I think X Reading is being used in a number of universities in Indonesia, in Japan, in Thailand, in Vietnam, and in some other places. Ladies and gentlemen, I've now come to the end of my presentation. I've shared basically two things. Number one, what is this thing about extensive reading and listening? What's the big deal, actually? And to me, it's a big deal, because this is one of the greatest, approaches to helping students, to supporting students in their journey to learning a new language, whether it's Japanese, whether it's English, any language, or even in their own language, in their own native language. And I've also shared with you some possible applications when you teach a reading lesson or when you teach a listening lesson. And if possible, you may want to set up a reading program or a listening program beyond what you normally do in your reading lesson and in your listening lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, again, the key takeaway, I hope you remember. What is the key takeaway, Kartika? Do you remember? Is this, yeah?
Yes.
Extensive reading and listening is perhaps the best way to improve language proficiency. If you're not doing it, then you are shortchanging your students and you are shortchanging yourself. This is my gift to you, free books for you to download. You can just scan the QR code and you can download the two beautiful books for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. Kartika, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Willy, for delivering such an inspiring material. Now I would like to summarize several key points in regard to your presentation. First, there are some purposes of extensive reading and extensive listening, which are for pleasure, getting general information, but remember, it's not specifically for study purposes. Therefore, we can acquire language from reading and listening. Second, the material for extensive reading and extensive listening should be interesting and easy. The language is accessible and the students can participate by doing the self-selection of material they like. There are benefits we can get from reading and listening, especially for our linguistic, cognitive, and affective that can contribute learners' fluency. And the teacher can apply extensive reading and extensive listening by using easier and enjoyable reading and listening material, and most importantly, be a model of passionate reader for your students. Now, Dr. Willy,
excellent summary.
Yeah, we have a question, but due to the limited time, maybe I will choose two questions from the chat box here.
Yeah.
So the first question is from Budi Setyandri.
Okay.
Dear Dr. Willy, I was a student at KBI years ago and I remember you gave lectures, and ever since I followed you. I'm currently teaching English and Bahasa in Unpar. The first question is how to encourage extensive reading in high-level education. And the second, do we still have to give marks? So that's the question from Budi Satyandri.
Yes, a quick answer is yes. For the first question, the answer is yes. Extensive reading is applicable to any levels of education. Now, recently, I had an opportunity to talk to a university in Thailand. It's one of the top universities in Thailand, and the name of the university is Chulalongkorn University. I had a chat with the higher authority, with the key appointment holders, and they decided actually to implement extensive reading to all 5,000 first-year students at the university. So the program is now still running, and it is also being, the program is being implemented in many other universities in Japan, for example. In fact, in Japan, it's mostly universities that implement extensive reading. The reason is very simple, because students spend like 6 years in the previous level of education, in SMP, in secondary, and in high school. But when they get to the university level, the English proficiency is still very, very low, at the A1 and A2 level. And a growing number of people now believe that extensive reading and listening is the way to go. You can't continue teaching what you have done, what you have taught before in the secondary school. The students have had 6 years of 6 years of learning the grammar. And still, they're not able to use the language for, real communication. So many universities, many people are really thinking about giving extensive reading and extensive listening a real chance to support our students' language development. So the answer is yes. Do we give marks? I think the answer will be up to you. A smart way will be to sort of not have a course called extensive reading. Instead, you can integrate extensive reading and listening into a course called communication skills, for example. Now, this is something that a colleague at Satyawatana University is doing now. So they designed a new course, and the name of the course is communication skills. But the background of that course is this, that the students will have to do a lot of reading, the students will have to do a lot of listening. That is the foundation. So the communication bit comes a bit later when the students do a presentation, when the students have a conversation, for example, and that is graded, that is marked. Yeah, but the reading and the listening is sort of the requirements for them to do before they perform their final, speaking task or whatever. So that would be my answer, because it's a bit funny if you create a new course called extensive reading, and sort of you're not teaching anything, right? Because extensive reading is providing students with a lot of resources, a lot of listening materials, a lot of reading materials for the students to do on their own. Our job is more like guiding the students, helping the students to choose the right kind of materials and things like that. But we don't actually teach. We don't. We don't teach in the sense that, okay, this book has like 20 difficult words and I'm going to explain these words to you. No, that's not what you do. Remember, in extensive reading and listening, the materials are accessible. The language level is at the student's level. So the students should be able to read without any difficulties. So we are not really teaching the students, but we are providing an opportunity for the students to develop their interests, develop their motivation, finding the right kind of books so that they are doing it, they are listening, and they are reading for a period of time. Thank you for your question. Very, very good question.
Okay. So we move to the next question, Dr. Willy. This is from Gaby Faustena. Pak Willy, I was a LA teacher in MYP curriculum. In IB MYP.
What is LA?
MYP curriculum.
What is MYP curriculum?
LA is language acquisition. MYP is a middle year program in IB International Baccalaureate.
Okay, go ahead, yes.
Yeah. IB uses Krashen theory in language acquisition. My question is, how do we make sure that we assist students to choose proper reading and listening material according to their level of acquisition?
Very easy. Just ask them, show them a book and ask them, read the first page, can you understand? If they read the first page and they understand, that's their level. If you want something interesting, teach them the 5-finger rule. 5-finger rule. You know, give them a book of their choice, ask them to read the first page. Every time they encounter a difficult word, 1 finger is up. If they see another difficult word, 2 fingers are up. If all 5 fingers are up, the book is too difficult for you. It's very easy. In fact, I would say that if 2 fingers are up, then that's okay. If no fingers are up, that's even better. Remember what I said earlier on, the language will have to be accessible, the language will have to be easy. And for students with little experience in literacy, yang tidak suka membaca, jarang sekali membaca, rarely doing the kind of reading that they're supposed to be doing, the materials will have to be below their level. Below their level. Below their level is good because that's how they get started. Sebelumnya nggak pernah baca kok. Gitu. So once they have become comfortable, will they stay forever reading easy materials? No. They will move on. They will move on. But give them that opportunity to experience the joy of reading and the joy of listening. Reading something that is interesting, reading something that is exciting, reading something that is easy. And they will continue moving upwards, finding something that is more challenging, something that is more interesting. Yeah, one worry that people have about reading easy materials is, what if my students stay at that level forever? I think that is the most pessimistic view about students. Students don't stay there forever. They move. They move up. Yeah? Okay, let me just say something about easy. What do you learn when something is easy? Deborah, any thoughts? When something is easy, what do you learn?
I'm happy, first of all.
Okay, you're happy, yes?
I can
yes.
understand what I
Yes,
read.
happiness is very good. Happiness is very important. In any kind of situations, in learning, you have to feel happy. So yes, Deborah, very good, happy. What else? Hey, Deborah is gone.
Oh, I thought you
you're still there.
understood it. So, yeah. What else? I can see another perspective of the world.
Yes.
I understand what they are talking about, right? Because I'm happy, it means that I can show my interest first of all, and then I can remember when I stop reading or I stop listening. When I encounter people who are talking about the same topic with me, I can relate with them.
Absolutely, yes. I think Deborah is talking about things that you can learn from reading materials.
Yes.
The content.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can learn difficult content actually when the language is simple, because then you will not be working too hard trying to understand the text.
Yes, sir.
So that you can focus your attention on the content itself. That's wonderful, wonderful thing that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Because you can then think, you can look at things from different angles, from different perspectives and things like that.
Yeah.
From a language acquisition perspective, let me say this very carefully, because a lot of teachers, find it difficult to understand why reading easy materials are good from a language acquisition theory. It is good because it provides an opportunity for the students to, number one, consolidate. That's a big word. And many of us don't really appreciate the importance of consolidation. What they learn initially is like bits and pieces of knowledge. They are not integrated. When the students get to see something again in a text, listening in spoken text or written text that they can read quickly and easily, that gives students a lot of opportunities to consolidate their knowledge of the language. And when that happens over a period of time, then there's an opportunity for them to restructure. Restrukturisasi ini kayak bahasa apa namanya politik. Restructuring what the linguistic system that they have in their head. Remember, students are still growing, developing. Yeah, they're still learning, they're still developing, and they need a lot of consolidation. They need a lot of integration. They need a lot of restructuring that they need to do in their head. All these things are mental, happening in their head. So we need to give them time to experience all these wonderful things that happen in their head mentally. Okay? So easy is good. Please tell me, please convince yourself that easy is good. Difficult is not a bad thing. If the students enjoy doing difficult things, that's okay. But my experience is that students don't enjoy doing difficult things. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions?
I think due to the limited time, we should close our discussion, Dr. Willy.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for Dr. Willy, who has enlightened us with the presentation, and also thank you for the participants who have actively participated during the question and answer session. Now, before we enter our parallel session, we would have our photo session. We have more than one screen in our Zoom meeting, so I will count 1, 2, 3 several times, and while I'm counting, please show the screen your most wonderful smile, and the committee will screenshot the screen. Okay, I will count 1, 2, 3. The next screen. Turn on your camera so you can join us. 1, 2, 3. The next screen. 1, 2, 3. Is it the last? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Willy. So before we enter our parallel session, I would like to remind you that there will be 6 parallel rooms that you can choose. In parallel session, you will be hosted by the host of each parallel sessions room. Each room has limited participants, so once the room has reached the participants limit, the host will close the room. I will remind you again about the topic in each parallel room. In parallel A and parallel B, you will have the topic of language teaching amidst pandemic. And then in parallel C, the topic is technology for language learning and language teaching amidst the pandemics. And in parallel D and parallel E, the topic is language and pandemic. And in the last room, parallel F, the topic is literature and crisis. You may leave this main room and enter the breakout room. Enjoy your parallel session and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Pak Dwi, is today your last day? Are you still working, teaching, part-time?
Hello.
Halo Pak Dwi, Halo Pak Dwi. Halo Pak Willy.
Hello, Pak. Are you still working or completely off work?
Probably yes, most likely yes.
Good for you.
Yes, I will, but I'll spend much more my time for my personal work. I'll develop applications or doing other things like that.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Good luck for you.
I have another 1 or 2 years, and then I will join you.
Okay.
Yes, I will probably be doing a bit of teaching here and there.
Yep. Okay.
And doing a lot of fun things as well, things that I haven't got round to doing.
Yep. Yeah, and that will be long for a free time for ourselves.
Yes, and a bit of traveling too.
Yep. Okay,
That's
good
good.
luck.
And doing a lot more reading ya Pak Willy.
Oh, absolutely, yes. That's right. Oh, Bu Novi. Hello, Ibu. Sorry I didn't see you.
Iya.
How are you, Ibu?
Banyak pertanyaan tapi nggak terjawab itu. Rame itu di chat room.
Okay, maybe we should have another session, round table session.
Iya. Terima kasih loh Pak Willy.
Nggih, sami-sami, Bu. Pak Muk masih lama ya, Pak? Pak Muk, I think Pak Muk still has another 10 years, is it?
Pak Muk masih 10 tahun.
No, Pak. 3 years, Pak. 3 years.
Oh, 3 years.
Yeah, because now I'm 62 already.
Okay. Kalau Pak Paulus masih lama ya, Pak ya?
Ya, masih lumayan, Pak Willy. Ya.
Ya.
Masih
Okay.
jam berapa saya? Jam 1 atau jam 2 gitu ibaratnya kalau waktu.
Oh gitu. Pak Dwi sudah jam 9. But I think if you are good, if you are healthy, I think you can continue working. You know, doing a little bit of teaching here and there, and doing a little bit of writing. Keeps you busy. I think it's very important to be, you know, to be healthy, to be thinking and doing things. I think that is very important.
Yes, Pak.
Pak Dwi tahu kan siapa Ibu itu loh, Bu Pomo dulu itu loh, siapa namanya Bu Gloria.
Bu Gloria Bejo Sudarmo.
Ya, Bu Gloria itu setelah selesai setelah pensiun itu dalam waktu berapa tahun itu sudah pikun.
Oh ya?
Oh ya, sudah pikun. Yang terakhir itu kira-kira sudah 5 tahun yang lalu saya ke rumahnya itu sudah ngalor ngidul, jadi sudah nggak ingat gitu loh. Kadang ingat, kadang enggak gitu. Terus mungkin 3 tahun belakangan ini sudah di rumah di rumah jompo.
Oh iya.
Kasihan
Ya
ya.
di rumah jatuh, tulangnya patah sampai pagi nggak ada yang nolongin. Terus dibawa ke rumah sakit, setelah itu dirawat di rumah jompo. Anak-anaknya datang tapi setelah itu ya nggak bisa apa-apa, mau dibawa pun akan susah.
Masih di Singapura?
Sekarang masih di Singapura, kayaknya masih di rumah jompo, kayak di nursing home gitu ya. Jadi the lesson for us itu we have to keep busy, we have to keep doing things mentally terutama, physically as well because